Of course, last year, Abby Poling dominated 2024 en route to her championship. So if you look at early favorites for 2025, I think we have to look at some frontrunners from last year in Dorian Penn and Maya Vug. We also have Chloe Chambers, who won last year at Barcelona, but she won't be racing with Haas's support this year. That will be Courtney Crone, who will be a rookie in this series. You might remember her from her wildcard entry in 2024. So, Emily, I'll start with you. Do you think Chloe Chambers can contend with the Dorian Penns and Maya Vugs of the world for wins and potentially even a championship?
Yeah, Ben, of course, as you mentioned, she won in Barcelona. I do also want to call out that she had 4 podiums last year and she finished sixth overall in the Drivers' Championship with quite a sizable lead ahead of Bianca Bustamante, who was in that seventh place in the overall Drivers' Championship. So I do think it's fair to have her part of this top contenders conversation with Dorian and Maya. And if we've learned anything from last season, is that anything is possible. And not to be the broken record on this topic, but it's just still so unfortunate what happened with Dorian's start of her year with that penalty. And then, of course, the injury that came later in the year. So it really seemed like that was her year. So I'm expecting Dorian to pull an Abby Poling and just completely dominate this season. But uh, P2 in that drivers championship is definitely up to grab. So we'll just have to see if Chloe Chamber has what it takes to kind of take the challenge to Mayo Vug, who I think are going to be in your top three fighting in that close battle.
Yeah, for Chloe, I think it's going to be a really interesting season because we've seen her W Series. Then she comes over to F1 Academy, has this very stellar year, and she's going to be with essentially the same team again. Going to be racing with them. Now has a second year under her belt. She should have some pretty good races, and I think could be up there with Maya, with Dorian Penn, and overall just contending for those podiums and potential wins. The one thing I'm thinking of mainly will be the consistency. Everyone's anticipating Maya Vug, Dorian Penn to be podium contender every single race. I think Chloe Chambers has the potential of doing that too. To do that, you got to have a good qualifying effort and you got to race smart just because of some changes that I know we'll be talking about a little bit on what F1 Academy has done. If she could be consistent up towards the front, she has a really good shot. There's no reason why she shouldn't be seen as a potential championship contender. And I think that would be a really great effort to put her up there as contenders for other series, potentially looking at Indy next in the future or Formula Regionals, Formula 3s. So it's going to be a big year for Chloe Chambers. Might be a little bit of pressure just because she knows this is going to be her last season here, but having that consistency will be a big boost in helping her get towards a championship picture.
Well, we talked about Courtney. Obviously, she had that wild card entry last season, so it won't be her F1 Academy debut, but the grid is still going to look very different nonetheless. Drivers back full-time from 2024 include Chambers, Penn, and Vug, but we also have Tina Hausman, Aurelia Nobles, and Leah Block. So of the 17 full-time seats, only 6 are returners from 2024. Joe, when you think about that, does that give you the idea that we might see a big gap between the front runners and the rookies? Will the front runners be the ones that have that experience from last year carrying over?
It's a very challenging prediction to make because one of the big things, you have the 6 teams there, 3 cars in each team. The one exception being High Tech, which of course has the wild card entry. If you're looking at how they've run their teams, you're going to have notes for all 3 drivers from the past year. So I think that's going to close the gap a little bit. One of these rookies could come out and really be, to some people, a surprise that, oh, they're contending for top 5, maybe a podium finish. Because, I mean, with only 6 drivers coming back, you know there's going to be some rookies scoring points. So I think it's not going to be too much of a big gap. Where the gap might occur are particularly looking at some of the tracks where you're going to have it where the racing is much more spread out. Passing is going to be a challenge. And if this is a track where they've been at before, then you could see more of that gap. But with some of the new stuff that they got, excluding Las Vegas, I think is almost in the weight level out the field. And overall, if there is going to be a gap, it might be something we saw last year where Abby Pulling was just on a league of her own. They just seem to have something special going on. If Dorian Pin, Maya Woog, or even Chloe Chambers have that, they're going to separate themselves.
Yeah, not too much to add here, Joe. I agree with you. I do think just in general in any sport, when you have a seasoned athlete returning with rookies, there is going to be some level of benefit. You know, they have training under their belt, they have previous experiences. So I do think that they will have some advantage. Is it going to be a huge gap that we saw like Abby versus the rest of the field just among those returning drivers? Probably not. I agree with you. I think that there is going to be a gap between Dorian and the rest of the field. And I really hope that's not unfair of us to kind of be making these predictions. I think Dorian herself probably has this chip on her shoulder type of feeling where she did not feel like she fulfilled everything she wanted to last season. So I do think that she's coming in with all of this experience, the added benefit of racing last season in this very particular series, and then a little bit of hunger because she wants to accomplish everything that she probably set out wanting to accomplish last season. So I agree with you. I think that going to these other new tracks is going to make things definitely interesting. You have the Dorian of it all. And then the last thing that I will say, personally, I really hope we see Miss Tina Hausman have a better season this year. I feel like she really had some things that were out of her control that caused her to struggle. So definitely going to be interesting to watch. And I think we're going to talk about something that is going to make this season very interesting to watch. So I'll pass it back to you, Ben.
Yeah, well, of course, it's important to remember you only get 2 years in this series, or if you win the championship, that you're not even allowed to come back for a third season or to defend your title. So there's always going to be a lot of turnover in this series, and that will continue to be the case until they change that rule, or as long as this series continues to exist. So we'll keep our eye on how the returners do versus the rookies. But one factor to consider is the new race weekend format and championship scoring. Race 1 will see the top 8 finishers scoring points, with the winner scoring 10. And then the second race will have a typical FIA system of the top 10, with the winner getting 25, 10th place getting 1 point fastest lap, and 2 points for pole. The big change, however, is race 1. This is, I guess, a page out of the sprint race book for Formula 2 or something like that. You'll see the top 8 from qualifying inverted in race 1. So if you qualify on pole for the second race, you'll start in 8th for the first race, and of course all the way down you'll start on pole if you're 8th in qualifying. So a bit of an inverted grid there for race 1. So Emily, what do you make of this rule change? Is it a good move to perhaps add some entertainment value? You know, I love entertainment when it comes to stock car racing. What do you think we're going to see from this in F1 Academy this year?
I think we can all agree we love entertainment. That's part of the appeal of why we watch motorsports and love it so much, is because it's so unpredictable. So on that sense, yeah, I think it's going to be extremely entertaining. From an athletic point of view, I am going to be a little bit of a negative Nancy. I'm not quite seeing the benefit from a driver development perspective. The whole basis of this series is to give these young women drivers preparation and help them develop into F1 level drivers that can one day go into that level of the series. So I'm of the feeling that if you were to walk up to any F1 driver today and ask them, "Hey, like, would you want to have an inverted, starting grid based off your qualifying?" I would say almost every single one of them probably would say no, and it's not something that we can expect. So I'm not really getting why this is going to help these drivers develop into that level of racing driver beyond the entertainment value, beyond perhaps the series has to do something interesting to draw in viewers. So again, sorry for being a little bit of a negative Nancy. Curious to hear what your thoughts are, Joe, and I'll step off of my soapbox for a second.
Well, it's a little bit of a similar take, I'll be honest, because I remember, and I think maybe Ben was with me. It was a few years ago. W Series had their race at Zandvoort. We did not see much of the slipstream, and we were talking about should there be DRS added to those cars to ensure we had more side by side passing type racing. And was our old colleague Daniel, I believe, that at times said the focus is more the driver development, as you mentioned, Emily. Getting them to go to that next level, the entertainment aspect should be not really there. And of course, we're seeing where Formula One, NASCAR, they're really trying to dive more into that, make it where the fans that may not understand just how great it is to see a race where it's purely strategy, someone's just dominating, and that's part of motorsports. I feel that should be more what we're having in F1 Academy, but I get it. F1 Academy, it's a business, they got big sponsors, so if they had to do something to try to make that championship a little bit closer, because Abby pulling what she did last year, just dominating it, no contest, especially when Dorian Pin got that penalty. I could see where they were just thinking, well, how can we make this a little bit more closer? Well, you have the fastest car starting eighth for the first race. If they could work their way to the front, we'll be talking about, I know in the future, oh, Dorian Penn or Maya Wood or a surprise like Chloe Chamber or maybe even a rookie. What an impressive drive to drove from 8th to 1st. But then second race, they may have just dominated unless something mechanical went wrong. So I could see where they were thinking of making such a move. I mostly don't prefer that. This is mainly to develop drivers for the next step. Do we really need this? I don't think so, but I could understand where the thinking went with this move.
Well, I personally think Maya Vu got robbed last year. She won the last race at Abu Dhabi. If F1 Academy had a playoff system like NASCAR, she would have been the champion. She would have been able to celebrate that victory even more. I think that's certainly what we need to do to bring more entertainment into this series. I think that would go a long way. Obviously, I'm joking. Encore fans can tell you that first and foremost for sure.